Advocacy in an election year. Thank you all for joining us out there. I'm here with Abby Levine, the Director of Alliance for Justice's Boulder Advocacy Program. Hi, Abby.
Hi, Carol.
So I want to start off by having you tell us a little bit about the Boulder Advocacy Program here at AFJ.
Sure, and hello to everybody out in Facebook land. Boulder Advocacy's mission is to help nonprofits and foundations be bold advocates. So organizations feel comfortable speaking out on behalf of their missions, their communities, and to really be able to speak their values. And we do that through three main ways. We do trainings, and we're excited to be launching this Facebook Live series. We have a whole series of publications and fact sheets, which you can access on our website. And then we also have a technical assistance hotline where either me or a member of the Boulder Advocacy team is available every day to answer questions. And that reminds me, just at the start, just put a caveat in that while I'm a lawyer and while our team are lawyers, we don't provide legal advice, but we're really here to help educate organizations about what's possible and to recognize that there's so much more that we can do than people often think.
Absolutely. And for those of us who are not tax lawyers, can you just give us a brief explanation about what a 501c3 is and what the general rules are for 501c3s?
Sure. So a 501c3 organization is a type of nonprofit tax-exempt organization that exists for charitable, educational, religious, scientific purposes. And contributions to 501c3 organizations are tax deductible. And the organizations are tax exempt, so they don't have to pay federal income tax. But there are limits to what 501c3s can do. And so 501c3 organizations have limits on how much lobbying they can do in terms of supporting or opposing legislation. And 501c3 organizations are absolutely prohibited from supporting or opposing candidates for public office. And that is a complete and absolute prohibition. And that's looking forward to your questions about that today.
Absolutely. And so now that we're in an election year, can you tell us how 501c3 can respond to candidates or political parties and remain nonpartisan? And maybe even explain what is considered partisan.
Sure, and that's a great place to start. And that's a concept that we talk about a lot, that 501c3 organizations need to be nonpartisan. And that is absolutely true. And we can't support or favor particular candidates or particular parties. But just being nonpartisan isn't enough. As a 501c3 organization, and so you or I representing Alliance for Justice or Alliance for Justice of what we post on our Facebook page or on our blog or in any other communication, we can't support or oppose any candidate, whether it's based on party affiliation or based on any other kind of criteria. And there are many, and so we can't, for instance, say that we want we favor women, or we hope that women are elected, or that and recognizing that there are some races in this country that are nonpartisan. So, for instance, school board elections. Folks who run for school board, and they're usually not partisan seats. And there are many, in some cities, where the mayoral race is a nonpartisan race. But we still, as a 501c3, can't support or oppose or favor one candidate over another. And so while we often talk about that we need to be nonpartisan, we're really using that as a shortcut for saying that we can't favor any particular candidate.
Got it. And so that's kind of a good leeway into my next question of, can you tell us who is considered a candidate now that we're in an election year?
Yes. So the IRS, which is the agency that oversees these rules and that enforces these rules, uses a very broad definition of candidate. So a candidate are those people who have filed, who are like, hey, I'm running for office, please vote for me, who've created exploratory committees. But the IRS also considers a candidate to be anyone who is thinking about running for office, or somebody where there's speculation about whether they'll run for office. And so as 501c3 organizations, we could not get involved in efforts to draft somebody to run. Or we could not get involved in an effort to encourage someone not to be renominated for a position. And so again, it's both the people who are officially candidates, but it's also people who are thinking about running, their speculation about whether they're running, their draft movements or their sort of dump movements. Those would all be, they would be considered candidates for these purposes.
Wonderful. And so the next question I have is, say I'm a representative of a 501c3 and we want to comment on a political candidate's statement or comment. What should I keep in mind?
Sure. So that's a great question, and it's something that we're hearing a lot more from organizations. And as for a 501c3 who wants to comment on a candidate's statement, they need to be very thoughtful about doing so. And before commenting, they first want to really think about who from the organization will make the statement or make the comment. And then second, sort of why and what they're going to say, and to really think it through. It's not something that we should do right off the cuff. And the reason a 501c3 could comment would be to sort of correct the record or to have a reason other than commenting on the candidate. And so we couldn't sort of comment on a candidate's statement to say, oh my gosh, that candidate was so good and cares about our issue so much. Make sure you remember that on election day. Or on the flip side, to say, oh my gosh, that candidate's a moron. Make sure you remember that on election day. But if a candidate says something during a debate, during a speech, that is just completely off the mark, using misleading information or providing bad facts, that an organization could make a statement to sort of correct the record. And in doing so, the organization would really want to focus on the issues and having it as an issue that's of great importance to the organization and that the organization has a track record of speaking on, and not focusing on necessarily the person who made the comment, but really focusing on what the issue is and how to correct that statement.
Got it. And I could keep asking you questions forever, but I have one last question before we open it up to the questions out there. So if I am a representative for a 501c3, does that mean that I can't comment on a personal capacity? What's that line?
And that is a really important question, and it's something that for all of us who work for 501c3 organizations or who sit on boards of 501c3 organizations, there's a real difference in what we can do in our professional capacity using organizational resources versus what we can do as individuals. So while you, Carol, or me, Abby, could not post something on AFJ's Facebook page, or I could not post something on my AFJ Twitter account about my preferred candidate for the upcoming congressional race in my home city and state of Alexandria, Virginia, I could on my personal Facebook page. And so I would need to make sure that I'm doing it in my individual capacity, using my personal email address, not doing it in the office, not using any organizational resources, but I certainly can. Wonderful. And we should need to remember that, and that again, while these rules about supporting or opposing candidates apply to the organization, not to us as individuals in our individual capacity.
Got it. And it seems like we have a question. So our first question is, what if a candidate makes a public statement that is really damaging or offensive about my organization's mission, such as advocating for people of color to crime and violence, and we feel like we would be derelict in our duty as an organization if we did not respond? Can we respond?
That is a great question, and one that we heard a lot in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election. And 501c3 organizations can comment. But again, as I mentioned earlier, they need to do so very thoughtfully. There's always some risk if a C3 comments on what a candidate says or is comparing candidates' views, because it could make one candidate look better or worse, or sort of indicate implicit support for or against a particular candidate. But in the instance of that you just raised, the organization could make a statement about sort of what the facts are, and saying, as an organization who's worked with people of color for generations or for decades, this is the information that we have. And so again, rather than saying that candidate was ill-informed and stupid and racist when he made the comment and really commenting on his characteristics, his fitness for office, the organization should use its sort of mantle as an issue expert, as an expert in the community, as a leader in the community, to really reinforce and in many ways to put out the positive information about their constituency and the issues that they care about.
That's really helpful to know. We have another question. So the next question is, you mentioned nominations. So what about cabinet nominations? Can we comment and weigh in?
Yes. So 501c3 public charities can weigh in on nominations for cabinet level offices or for judicial nominations. Because those positions need to be confirmed by the Senate, weighing in on the nominations will be considered to be lobbying, but 501c3 public charities can lobby, and there's actually a very generous amount of lobbying that we can do. So organizations certainly can weigh in and really should be weighing in, and we've seen a lot of that activity over the last year or so.
So I'm going to plug in another question here. Does Boulder Advocacy have any materials that can help nonprofits figure out their lobbying capacity?
Thank you. So in addition to our technical hotline, that technical assistance hotline where we're welcome your emails, and you can email us at advocacy@afj.org, or you can call us at NP Lobby, and again that phone number is NP for Nonprofit Lobby. We also have lots of material on our website, which is boulderadvocacy.org, and one of those publications is the Rules of the Game. And this guide is a really comprehensive overview of everything that 501c3 organizations can do in an election year. And yes, it also talks about what we can't do, but it really focuses on all of the types of activity that we can do. And so I encourage you to go to our website, download a copy, and also feel free to look in our sort of the section of the website with election related resources, and we have lots of other materials as well. And if you can't find what you're looking for, call us and we're happy to direct you.
Thank you. So the next question we have is, if two candidates are running for a seat, can my C3 organization point out which one is better on my issues without coming out and saying vote for X?
So we, as a C3, we certainly could not come out and say vote for X. But by comparing two candidates or three candidates on one particular issue or on a narrow range of issues, it could implicitly look like we will be supporting one candidate over another. And so the IRS has said that C3s can put out information about where the candidates stand on issues, but it should be on a broad range of issues. And so by focusing just on a narrow range of issues, so if we were an organization focused on gun safety and we compared the candidates' views on gun safety, it could look like, based on the answers or based on the candidates' positions, that we were suggesting or that it was clear which candidate was good or bad. And so again, as a C3, it's not enough to refrain from explicitly endorsing candidates, but we also want to be very mindful about even implicitly doing so by suggesting which candidate is better on our issues.
Got it. These are great questions. I'm learning a lot. So the next one is, if I avoid mentioning a specific candidate or candidates, can my organization make statements like, now is the time to support women for elected office, or now is the time to support Latinos for public office, or something similar? Can you make those statements?
Sure. So again, as a C3, we can't support or oppose candidates. And we can't support or oppose candidates by name, but we also can't support or oppose candidates for elective office based on characteristics. And so we can't say we're going to support women candidates, or we're going to support Latino candidates or candidates of other people of color. We can talk about, however, the importance of increasing participation in our policy-making process by women, by people of color, by particular groups by other types of constituencies. We can encourage people and talk about that we want more people in elective and appointed office, And so there are ways we can do it, but again, we just want to be mindful that we're not suggesting who people should elect.
Absolutely. And then I like this question. So since the president has announced that he is running again, the current president, can a C3 make comments on the president's actions? How would that work?
That's a fabulous question, and we actually started getting questions about that, like the day after he was sworn in, when he officially filed his papers for re-election.
And that's very normal, isn't
It
it?
is. That is done all the time, and it's done for fundraising purposes. As a C3, again, we can't support or oppose candidates, but we can hold our sitting elected officials accountable, and we can praise them for good decisions and actions that they do and take, and we can criticize them for actions that we disagree with. And the president is not only running for re-election or running to be president in 2020, he is still our sitting president. And the same holds true for many of our members of Congress, Senate, in many of your home areas, it might be your mayor, your governor, that are incumbents and also running for re-election or election to a different position. And so we need to, just as we need to think about, are we speaking in our individual capacity or are we speaking on behalf of our organization, we also have to look at, are we looking to criticize the president as president, or are we looking at him as the nominee or a candidate in the 2020 election?
Got it.
And so there we can, again, criticize the president. We can call him out on all of the decisions that he makes, whether it's on immigration reform, education, environmental issues, public foreign policy, whatever the issue is. And we really want to think about sort of why are we doing that? How does it fit in with our mission? And recognizing that some of it may, particularly when we're dealing with legislators, it may be lobbying, but we certainly can hold our sitting legislators accountable.
Wonderful. And then we have another question. So can C3s organize and host a candidate forum? What should they keep in mind?
C3s can host candidate forums. And the goal for doing so is to educate the public about the issues. We can't host a candidate forum as a way to sort of suggest which candidate we like. So we need to make sure we're inviting all candidates. We need to make sure we're inviting all viable candidates. It's best, if possible, to invite all candidates, but if there are, an excessive number of candidates or a number where it's just going to be too wieldy to have a real conversation, then we can invite just viable candidates. And there needs to be some kind of objective criteria for determining viability. And we need to make sure that at least 2 candidates are there. We can't have a candidate forum with just one candidate. And we want to ask questions, again, on a broad range of issues. And we want to ask unbiased questions. Those are the main points to keep in mind. And again, there are some other little nitpicky issues that, we lawyers think about. And you can call us. We have a whole fact sheet talking about hosting candidate forums, but it's something that's really valuable for groups to do, and it's really valuable for groups to do it in coalition. And that way, organizations, again, each organization may have their own particular issue focus, but by coming together, you may have that broad range of issues, and it's more likely that candidates will be willing to participate when it's being hosted by a broad range of organizations.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we have another question. So do you recommend that senior people at 501c3s put statements on their personal social media pages? For example, the views expressed here are my own personal opinions.
It's helpful. Disclaimers are always helpful. And it's helpful to help reinforce whether somebody's speaking in their individual capacity or in their organizational capacity. And so if somebody is very well known and very prominently associated with an organization, it may be helpful that when they are speaking in their individual capacity to have that disclaimer, just to help remind people.
Absolutely. And then can our organization thank a given lawmaker for her leadership on a piece of legislation?
Yes. So 501c3s can thank legislators for championing issues, championing pieces of legislation. You do want to be mindful if that legislator is up for re-election, that the closer we get to an election, the more it may look like you're giving her an award or praising her to help her election campaign. And so it's not to say you can't do it, but you want to think about the context. And so timing is important. You want to think about, why are you giving the legislator an award now? Did the piece of legislation just pass, for instance? Okay. Giving a legislator an award right after or right at the close of a legislative session in which the legislation passed may be a really good factor. If you're championing somebody or praising someone for work they did 3 years ago, when now they're up for re-election, it may look like, well, you're doing it to remind people, oh, remember the great work that she did 3 years ago. And so that timing is important. You also, when giving the award, really want to focus on the legislator as a legislator, and not talk about whether she's up for re-election, not mentioning the election, not talking about how much voters appreciate her work, not comparing her views to that of her opponent. And working with if there are legislative staff to coordinate it, as opposed to working with the campaign.
Again, if you have any questions, feel free to call Boulder Advocacy and they can help you with those. So another question, if you organize and train people in advocacy and they decide to run for an elected position, can you continue to train them? What do you need to tell them to make sure that you're not unfairly impacting the election?
That is a really good question all of these questions we could spend a lot of time talking about, and there are all of these questions, and as you've probably noticed, that most of my questions have these long-winded answers, because there are no clear answers to a lot of this, that the answers in terms of what is supporting or opposing a candidate is in most cases based on or determined based on a facts and circumstances test, where we don't even know what all the facts and circumstances are or how they're going to be weighed in any particular circumstance, in any particular event. So, which makes it a little challenging. So as 501c3 organizations, again, we can't help or hurt, but we can't provide support to any particular candidate. So if we have a program where we are training people, we don't have to treat candidates less favorably than anybody else. So for instance, at Boulder Advocacy, we run trainings all the time about what are the legal rules for 501c3 organizations, what's lobbying, what's permissible in an election year, how can foundations support advocacy. And people come, and there may be people who have come to those trainings who have decided that they're going to run for office. Yeah. They may be a candidate, and they may say, oh, but we still want to understand these rules better. Can we can we come to one of your trainings? We as a C3 can still train somebody who's a candidate if we're training them just the way we would somebody who's not a candidate. So we couldn't say, oh, well, you're a candidate, you can come for free, or we'll give you special treatment. In addition, we couldn't provide the kinds of support where we would help a candidate determine their campaign strategy, for instance. That would be seen as crossing the line into supporting a candidate, and could be seen as a campaign contribution as well. So again, we really have to look at what the training is. With so many of these questions, the devil really is in the detail. And there are a lot of devils, I feel like, sitting on my shoulder, where we're always like, all right, what can we do? What is the risk? And so we would really need to look at sort of what is the training program, how is the training, or the folks who are candidates, would the information they be getting be any different from non-candidates, to really look at and to think about what that would mean.
Got it. That's complex. We have another question. So can C3s create scorecards based on issues?
So 501c3 organizations can create scorecards with based on a broad range of issues with the purpose of being used for sort of lobbying or issue advocacy.
Okay.
And so we can create scorecards at the end of a legislative session, for instance, where that we can sort of look at who were the champions on our issue, who do we need to better educate in the next cycle. We can't use, or in the next legislative session, we can't create scorecards to sort of grade candidates or to compare candidates. And we often will see those, and you may be saying, well, I see those kinds of scorecards all the time. And in many cases, they are done by 501c4 organizations, they're done by unions, they're done by political organizations. And so again, as C3s, we can do scorecards, but they're really done to help us sort of better understand where our legislators stand on issues so we can use it in our lobbying or other issue advocacy work.
Got it. Okay, well, I think that is all the questions. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions out there. And will you just remind us where people can go so that
Absolutely.
they can access the resources
Absolutely.
for Boulder Advocacy?
So you can go to our website, which is boulderadvocacy.org, or you can email us questions at advocacy@afj.org, or you can call us at 866-NP-LOBBY.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Abby, for sharing your insight. And we hope you enjoyed our first Facebook Live.
Thanks so much, Carol.
Thanks
to all
Abby.
of you.